Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle Agentic AI Summit. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would love to introduce our speakers, Yannis Broustas, Vice President of Product Marketing at UiPath, and Tim Sanders, Head of AI Research at G2. We are excited to have Yannis and Tim with us for a thought leadership titled The Next AI Maturity Curve, Orchestration, Trust, and Scale. Welcome, and over to you.
Hi, I'm Tim Sanders. I'm the head of AI research at G2 and an executive fellow at the Digital Data Design Institute at Harvard.
Hi, I'm Yannis Broustas. I'm the vice president of product marketing at UiPath. And on my free time, I teach startups at NYU.
Yannis, how do you think agentic AI and orchestration are going to come together over the course of the next few years?
It's actually very fascinating because we're living in these times where AI is really becoming materialized in society, but also in business. Agents are being talked every 3 seconds. And I believe that at the end of the day, the applications are endless. For the business, orchestration is what brings it together. Because agents left out in the wild probably is not what organizations are expecting. Today, I think they are doing these experimentations and they're doing some POCs and POVs. But once they have to deploy them into actual workflows or processes, it's all about how to orchestrate those agents together with deterministic robots, with automation, with human in the loop, in order to achieve those business outcomes. So I believe that the evolution from agentic AI to orchestration will have to do with actual process outcomes and how these are materialized for the enterprise. But I don't know, maybe you're having a different view on this?
Well, you're in the business, right? Maestro helps organizations orchestrate, and I would venture to say that the value proposition is to improve the outcomes, right? So that's the reason for orchestration. As an AI researcher, I take a little bit of a different approach to it. So I talk to heads of IT, CTOs, et cetera. I've had qualitative interviews with 40. We've surveyed over 1,000. The place I come from with orchestration is that IT leaders, they want to have an aligned approach that is strategic as opposed to scattershot tactical, right? One IT leader told me, these AI point solutions, these individual agents, he called it the agent underground at my company. It's the wild, wild west. And I said, what's the downside? And he goes, that's not the point. Let cyber worry about that. I care about alignment so we get 10x. He goes, because all you're getting is 10%, 30% when it's all scattershot here and there. You're getting breadcrumbs. He's like, I want the whole loaf of bread. He said, so I have a data architecture. I've spent a lot of money and a lot of time working out with my business partners. I want the agentic automation to align to the data architecture. He says, when I figure out our position on models, are they large, are they small, is it open, is it closed, are we a shop of one company like OpenAI? When I know that, that's going to be another wave of orchestration. So I find it fascinating that IT leaders are now looking at agentic from an opportunity cost lens and not a risk mitigation lens. That's a lot to do with the fact they're younger than they were 10 years ago. But I believe it's because companies have figured out it all starts with data and everything needs to align with the data architecture. And as you know, different agentic solutions have different data sources, different governance rules, and different ways of managing that either in working memory, edge, no write, et cetera. So IT leaders see orchestration probably as their biggest strategic venture of the year. So your timing with Maestro couldn't be better.
It's interesting because what you're describing triggers an analogy that I would use. In the early days of AI, the destination of the journey was AI itself. And we are moving into this more mature phase where the destination is the outcome, is the process outcome, the business outcome, whatever that may be for every organization, where orchestration is the vehicle that takes you to that journey, to that destination, and AI, together with the data, together with automation, are the fuel that actually make that car move towards that destination, that car of orchestration move towards the destination of outcomes.
And I see that in the survey, the G2 survey data. We found that right now, 51% of all software spend is coming out of central IT. which was not the case last year. It was not the case in 2023 because AI, especially generative AI and now agents, were experiments, and they were funded with operational, like OpEx. They were funded with R&D budgets, CEO slush funds. Now IT's like, it's being treated as an operational investment now to sustain our business, and that changes the game. So orchestration, that's when you need orchestration the most. It's no longer a bunch of in search of perfect use cases. There's one more thing, though, that I find fascinating here. This time last year, I was at a conference at Harvard Business School around artificial intelligence, and one of the researchers revealed that by 2026, which is just around the corner, there'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 billion agents that are rogue, meaning they were deployed, but no one turns them off.
Yep.
And think of them pinging, pinging, pinging. Orchestration is going to clean the mess up that is coming from a lot of deployed but not managed agentic instances, and that's fascinating.
So, Tim, would you say that agentic orchestration, besides the fact that it brings together the workflows and the processes to their outcomes, it also brings together the different personas in the organization with their different objectives and the different dynamics? You talked about IT and business and everything in between.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is coming together even more with agentic orchestration now?
Absolutely, because what I think of orchestration as is a forcing function for true collaboration, which has never been more important, right? Research I've seen and conducted at my previous company, Deeper Media, found that when you think about problem solving, the speed of problem solving is dependent on the number of perspectives in the room. We see each other's blind spots. We capture patterns that others might not be seeing. I always like to think of like real go-to-market impact. It's like the Beatles, okay? If there's no Ringo Starr, it's just Wings with a feature by John Lennon. It's not the same animal at all. You've got to have all four. In fact, that's what I've learned. If orchestration can bring together 4 different perspectives in the room based on obligations and department, you are successful 80% of the time walking out of that collaboration experience with the next play that moves the needle.
Yeah, and I guess on a fun note, it makes sense that we called our capability, our orchestration capability Maestro, because that's the whole point of conducting an orchestra
That's
of
right.
talented musicians
Yeah.
to produce something that is really phenomenal.
Yeah, you hear so much in technology, we need a source of truth. But I think with agentic, we need a point of coordination. And I think that's what Maestro can do.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And how do you see that compared to real use cases? Maybe the market sometimes, I see the market, I see customers sometimes being confused on where to deploy AI and agents. Do you see those use cases being agnostic and wide, or do you see them being more specific and more deep?
Depends on the culture of the organization. But what I've seen so far in the world of agentic is adoption follows the most business pain. I always tell people, if you want to get ROI with AI, regardless of the flavor, start with the business problem and work backwards, right? Don't start with the AI that you love and then go find something for it to solve. So that's why in 2024, customer service was the dominant use case, because organizations' customer service debt they were walking into every day was so great, even an occasional hallucination was better than nothing, right? So the blast radius didn't matter to them. Now, they're not going to do invoicing. They're not going to do supply chain arbitrage like that because the pain's not great enough, so the risk stands out as a blocker. This year, the story's changing a little bit. Software coding has emerged as the #1 source of agentic. And it's not because it's a pain point, it's because it's a 10x opportunity, right? So if you can create a 10x engineering culture, the velocity of shipping updates and new products will be your moat. And that's exciting because I don't want to see agentic as a band-aid you put on an organization who either can't staff up to a situation, or in the case of customer service, there's something wrong with their products or their services, right? I like to see what's going on in software because I think in the future, we'll all use agentic for the upside and not just to reduce the pain.
Absolutely. So, Tim, in this new world that is, we are waking up to, we're going to have AI, we're going to have agents, we're going to have automations. We're going to have even people involved in every part of a process. What are your feelings about the trust and the governance aspect of it? And how important do you think it is to have optionality of what tools and what technologies you are putting in an orchestrated workflow?
Let's start with trust. I'm doing a lot of research now on what I call trust gaps. Trust gaps reflect the inability of a business or technology leader to adopt a winning solution at the same rate it's becoming more reliable. So there's a gap. Cloud got a lot better. Some people said, I'm still not going to trust cloud. And they created a massive loss, $44 billion a year, every single year from 2006 to 2021. The profile of that risk is 5x bigger in a world of agents because we're not just talking about moving content or moving data to the cloud. We're talking about giving autonomy to artificial intelligence machines, right? So the trust gap is something we have to solve. And the reason trust governance is important is A, if we guarantee guardrail, human in the loop, escalations, you get more experimentation. You get a little bit of leash. But the biggest issue is this. When it comes to trusting tech, understand that trust arrives by mule, okay? It leaves on a Maserati. So you have to have governance because you can have 15 excellent outcomes and one security breach, one operational gaffe, and everybody will point to that and say, program canceled, we're going back to picks and shovels.
Yep.
So that I think is the bigger issue, is there's just not enough forgiveness for any breaches of trust in this world of agentic, because we're giving it autonomy to take actions, access our systems, and use our tools. So I think that's the key to it. That being said, I believe trust governance increasingly will have to be more automated itself in the future. As I work with companies thinking about human in the loop, I talk to them about you need to have a staffing dynamic around human in the loop so that the human approval requirements decrease 90% every year for the next 5 years. You're going to start out with it really not being much of a time saver. Think of it as a training year, right? Everything is escalating. But as the time goes by and the tech gets better, the data becomes more reliable, humans will be able to manage a much larger workforce of agents, and that's where scale is going to happen. But we're not there yet.
It's interesting. I would say that trust, first of all, I fully agree with everything you said, and I will add some. Because it's not only to the detail and to the technicality that you described, I also see that trust and governance within the actual organization. Like, who is leading those initiatives? Are we going to give away, or are we going to give it full autonomy to an agent to go do the more complicated aspects? And who are the right people to build those agents and then operate them? And
That's right.
Even human in the loop. When we say about human in the loop, who are the right humans? Are they the same people that they were before? Or
That's right.
do we see, because we are experiencing an evolution of the skill set required to even be the human in the loop.
That's right.
So I was saying earlier, and I think we've heard it a couple of times, that it's not about AI taking over people. Like, I don't think this is something that is going to happen. But the people who know how to use AI better, who know how to build trusted AI, and who can govern all those agentic applications, they're the ones who are going to stand out in the new modern organization. What's your take on that?
Well, I want to really just press on one thing you said that I love, and that is the skill sets for managing people and people's actions are different than the skill sets for managing agents and their actions. But the reason is because we develop relationships with people. So when you see really good managers at a company, they've developed trust in their people through relationship building, right? Through mutual vulnerability. So they develop an instinct so they can have a pretty large group reporting up to them and give them a lot of autonomy because they have all these little shortcuts. We don't have that with agents. But what I'm seeing now is with governance systems combined with people that learn to kind of think of agents as an extension of their team, a team member, the trust will build back to where in just a few years, there's going to be a type of manager who will be able to scale to this opportunity, trust a lot of agents in the right sort of way, manage them like good managers manage people, and run actually a lower risk enterprise than they're running today. It's fascinating. It's a different skill set.
So it's interesting. You're describing a future of work that I absolutely see coming. I'm debating though, is it going to be more fun, more exciting, or is it going to be boring and dull?
Depends.
I think it depends. The answer is depends, but it's definitely going to accelerate the way that we work.
Yeah.
It's going to give us a broader spectrum of possibility
Yeah.
and what we can do with it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. I'm curious what.
Well, let's go back to Henry Ford. So, he wanted the Model T to only cost $2,000. And he had a vision to get there. He had to do a lot of things. But one of the things he had to do is he had to use a whole lot of machine automation. So he had situations where you'd have people putting together brakes and transmissions, and he would use machines and do it like 5 times faster. And a lot of the people said, all I'm doing is managing a machine. Before we were craftsmen. And they said, are we going to enjoy our job or are we going to hate it? And Henry Ford said, well, if you think it's true, you're right. And if you don't think it's true, you're right. So I think our attitude about what AI liberates is going to determine whether or not work is still fun. One of the ways I think about it is when you kind of look at the work that we do, to use Covey's 4 quadrants, you could say there's tedious, important, tedious, not important, creative, not important. How much time are we spending in the tedious, not important quadrant in our life? What if I could take that off your plate? To answer your question bluntly, go talk to a teller today whose grandparents were a teller. I've actually done these interviews for my book, okay? Granddad counted money, okay? Granddaughter gives loan advice. So you tell me.
We are talking about a future of orchestration in a trusted, governed way. How is optionality playing into it? And why is it important to be open and flexible in a system that combines all these different entities between AI, agents, robots, people, and everything else?
Well, there's a book called Black Swan. Great book. The author talks about known unknowns, okay? We have a known unknown. We have no idea who's going to win this.
Yep.
If I'm a betting person, I like OpenAI for the competition. But good gosh, it's early. Who knows how the thing's going to unfold? It gets deeper than this. We don't even know if closed source versus open source has been settled yet. Look what happened with DeepSeek just earlier this year. We're not even sure if small, or what you call specialized, versus large language general models will prevail. With all of that uncertainty, why would you want to be locked into one solution? But here's the second issue. I mentioned before that IT managers want to orchestrate, but what they fundamentally think about now is alignment with data architecture strategy and their emerging point of view about models, okay? If you don't have optionality, then you can't align with today's IT managers and they can't align with you. So I think it goes both ways. It's important for the customers to have optionality because we don't know where it's going to land, but it's just as critical for the platforms to have optionality. Right now, we're seeing this play out with Windsurf, a very popular coding wrapper, if you will. Purchase talks now with OpenAI. What happens? Anthropic comes out with the new Sonnet, and they don't give access to Windsurf. All of their customers have to bring their own keys. This is what happens.
Yep.
Right? Yep. So you need to be able to pick your own model, pick your own open versus closed source discipline moving forward for you to flex into what ends up being the most reliable solution in the long run. You still don't know what it is.
And it's interesting because that applies not only to today, but as we're moving to a more coded agents future, more like pro-dev type of agents, that optionality becomes even more important because you want to make sure that you have the best of breed on their territory, on their niche, specific niche, and make sure that the platform orchestrates all of these entities towards, again, what we were saying earlier about the destination of business outcomes.
Well, and think about the development environment. So, if you talk to a lot of developers, and I know you do, I do all the time, some might say, Claude, best for coding. And I say, coding apps?
Or could
mobile? And they're like, well, no, not for that. I'm actually using more specialized models. I hear a lot about Bedrock at AWS. I hear a lot about Granite now at IBM. So I'm like, oh, okay. What about robots? Not bots, humanoid robots. There's going to be a massive explosion of app technology just for humanoid robots. What do you think the best coding platform is going to be in terms of models? They're like, I don't know, I've never done it. I'm like, this is my point. For all you know, it's Grok.
Yeah.
Right? Because of Tesla. You have no idea how the thing's going to shape out, even in a specific use case like software code.
Yeah, I agree. So in this world of optionality, which I fully understand and fully agree with you, we're going to have multiple vendors, dozens, if not hundreds of vendors, for each one of those entities. For the platform, for the orchestration layer, for the agent, for the automation, for all these different entities. Our customers and organizations out there will have to be pitched and decide which ones fits their mandate. So in that point solution versus more holistic platform approach, where would you see the market moving?
I think it's part of the maturity model for technologies. A lot of times when new technologies come out, you have point solutions out of necessity, right? And then you have platforms that come along, but the platforms have terrible UI. So the user's conflicted. And I'm specifically talking about what I've experienced with Microsoft, for example, or for those in the space of human capital. ADP is a classic example of this. ADP doesn't design as beautifully as a lot of startups that do little pieces and parts of payroll or procurement management or whatever. So there's always that maturity, but what I've seen throughout technology always play out is point solutions mature to platform solutions, because at the end of the day, it's got to scale. We got to create equal access across the whole business to get the actual velocity at an enterprise level. And the issue with point solutions is without some orchestration, they don't talk to each other. So you've got to manually arbitrage everything together, and that's not a digital mature approach.
Agreed. And from the perspective of the customer as well, I think that many of our organizations have invested in different type of solutions over the last couple of decades in technology. And the way that they evolve them, the way that they bring them into the future is very interesting in the new agentic era, right? Are you bringing your RPA implementations into the future? Certainly you do. Do you bring them as point solutions, or do you combine them under an orchestration layer? I think that combined with all the new artifacts, like the models, maybe you've done some POC with some of the vendors that you mentioned, and you want to make sure that these get translated into the future. So it goes back to something we were saying earlier, the optionality of an orchestration layer that is trusted and governed. By the way, I think I combined the last 15 minutes that we've been talking, is what makes gives the answer to, is it a point solution or is it a platform? I think that's where I would start with.
And I think the key here is a point solution to me is defined as operating without communication to other point solutions in a way where they're collaborating as machines. Okay, so it's almost like when you have a silo culture at a company. Marketing doesn't talk to sales, sales doesn't talk to product doesn't talk to partnerships, et cetera. That's what point solutions can be in an organization. So that's why if you can bring multiple point solutions together under orchestration, you get the beauty of startup AI, which is very user-focused, versus platform UI, which is very scale-focused. And I think you get the best of both worlds in that situation.
I agree. I fully agree. You?
So UiPath, stunning pivot. The OGs of RPA, the spearhead of agentic automation. That's a major transition. I mean, it's literally deterministic to probabilistic, and it's fast. Talk to me about how your customers are making that transition, given the environment.
You use the word pivot, and this is a big debate that we're having, because we don't see it as a pivot, we see it as an evolution. And an evolution of a journey that started with our customers and with organizations around the world with automation, started with our RPA. It expanded to more holistic end-to-end automation. And now, by adding the agentic layer, the next part or the missing piece of what our vision was always about, it's an evolution. So the way that we're experiencing it, I don't know if you remember this morning, one of our long-term customers said that automation allowed us to do 80% automation within a certain workflow, and now agents are coming to take us from 80 to 99% or even 100%. Hence, it's not about what do I need to replace, but it's what can I enhance with AI and with agents on top of what I've already been doing for some time.
That's right. That's right. So what I see in this evolution that you're making is thinking more end-to-end instead of taking pieces of an end-to-end process and automating those for a net increase in productivity. I was talking to a researcher who does a lot of work on tool calls for agents, and he talked about the idea that for him, traditional automation, he said you look at it like a buffet, like where you get the green beans, dessert, and the iced tea, okay? With agents, you get the buffet. And so I think that looks like what that transformation is like. But how do you take customers along who are very satisfied with RPA's dependability, and you're going to move them into a more dynamic environment, albeit more end-to-end? How do you take the customer with you on that?
So I'll represent it with a very simple saying, which is think big, act small. I'm a bit sensitive when I hear the term end-to-end because that's the objective, that's the destination, that's the vision. But to get to end-to-end, you cannot start with end-to-end. You start with the pockets of value, and once you start adding more and more and more of those pockets of value, you're getting closer and closer to end-to-end. I am not a believer that an agent is gonna start top-down and it's gonna take over the entire workflow and figure it out on the go, because that's gonna fail, right? Back to trust and governance that we were discussing earlier. On the opposite way, if you think like that, but then you start small and you say, okay, in my purchase to pay, I'm going to start with invoicing as a workflow, and I'm going to start there. And then I'm going to go and do a sister workflow and another sister workflow and another brother activity. And I start stitching them together. Guess what? You are starting with these pockets of value, which you're optimizing one by one or in parallel. And eventually, you get into this unified experience that is close to end-to-end. Is it 100%? Maybe yes, maybe not, but it's very close to it.
I like that. And so I'll play with you. Let's play dual professor here a little bit. So one of the exercises I like to use with students is let's ratchet up to the higher order processes and then taskify our way to the bottom, okay? So higher order process, if you're a chief revenue officer, is revenue production. Who does that? Regional vice president of sales is responsible for a current revenue production. That's a process, okay? It's an end-to-end process. But there's processes underneath that, right? So there's account management's a process. Within account management, there's onboarding and activation. That's a process. There's renewal. That's a process. There's lead generation to get all the way to the first human being meeting. That's a process. Now, that's where I think end-to-end is fascinating, is in the sub-processes, not the meta processes, right? So for example, at G2, our data is suggesting one of the fastest agentic adoptions right now is simply generating sales-accepted opportunities. For nurturing, right? It's not that much of a multi-turn agent, but it still contributes a heck of a process to the overall picture because of the cost and the time to traction for human BDRs. So that's a situation where it's not generating the CRO revenue directly, but it solves a very specific problem of feeding the AEs, a cadence of meetings that then plugs into the Uber processes.
And I will say that you made it sound very linear and very smooth. The reality is that those sub-processes are not as clear in taxonomy as you described them, because some of them are higher, some of them are lower, some of them are wider, some of them are deeper. So it's not only the fact that you start from the Uber process into the sub-processes and you go down in taxonomy, but some of them are multi-levels, some of them are one level, some of them go up to the CRO, and some of them the CRO never experiences. So it's also the multi-process and the multi-levels of these sub-processes and pockets of value that I used as a term earlier that will allow you to then go and say, I've managed to automate the entirety of the process or a big part of the process.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's even company to company, right? So I'll give you an example. Back to AI sales agents. It all depends on your total addressable market, right? So it's like you wouldn't have heavy automation of outbound if you have a small TAM because you've only got 5,000 prospects in the world. You probably want a human to touch all of those. On the other hand, if you've got a massive TAM with 500,000 potential customers, you're never going to reach that book with humans anyway. So your tolerance for automation is going to be higher. So I find what you say is true, but it's even more complicated, right? It's not just the sub-processes by category and taxonomy. It's company by things like total addressable market. So it's very interesting.
And I'm going to add to that, agentic automation is industry agnostic, use case agnostic. You can automate pretty much everything in a business. What it is not agnostic though, it's the regional complexities of a global business. And it's a very different thing if you're applying agentic automation in an organization that speaks only one language versus an organization that speaks 5 languages or 10 languages, because they are deployed and they have business all around the world.
That's right.
And it's a different...
Because you're going to get more latency as it's trying to do translation in real time. I get it.
And what if you are an organization like a Japanese Toyota that has multiple different business units that have nothing to do with them, with each other, right?
And don't like to talk to each other, as we learned from Sony's case study.
Even if they do. It's very different mentality and different culture if you're producing cars versus producing engines or versus producing anything else, and anything in between. So I don't know how you're experiencing that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think we haven't had enough time in this test time for agents to really understand the global implications. We're so laser focused on what's going on in the United States. We're kind of getting focused on EMEA. We're starting to pay attention to China, but that ain't the whole world.
Yeah.
When the whole world comes around to it, I think that, you know, regional customization at the platform level will be a breakthrough strategy.
I agree.
Because there's cultural issues here too, right?
I agree.
So, like, I know for a fact that in certain parts of Asia, explainability and transparency are not valued. In fact, they're considered barriers to adoption, meaning too much time explaining, for example, drugs. So you don't hear drug commercials in China give you all the complications. They just say this is the drug and the government allows it to be sold. Even though here in the United States, because of the explainability cultural ethos, we tell you all the things that can happen. That's coming to AI. In certain countries, they don't want to tell you you're working with a bot because they think you won't use it. They just say, here you go, you're going to get your solution. Here we say it's a bot. So I think cultural implications are going to have a big difference too about how we implement agentic automation.
I agree.
So it's great talking to you, Giannis. Where can we get more of your wisdom?
Tim, listen, I don't know where you can find me, but we all know where we can find you. Like, it was such a pleasure to be with you, to talk with you, to have you among us today. Obviously, UiPath represents part of this agentic vision. Our agentic automation value proposition is all about agents, robots, and people working together. But I know that at G2, you're doing this phenomenal research as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, man. Great talking to you, buddy.
Thank you both for such an insightful session, and thank you everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin shortly, so please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected to the next session, and we look forward to seeing you there.